You can model a brain using physical reservoir computing, and if you can model a brain, you can make one that is mentally ill, and believe it or not, there's a reason we might want mentally ill AI, and we will talk about it. This is one of my favorite areas of computation. You can also model our brains using a digital system, in which the spiking patterns in our own brain create logic, and that is remarkably compatible with physical reservoir computing. It is also a two-way street, because you can take those modeled spiking patterns and use that to communicate with real neurons. This is remarkably helpful when it comes to things like occupational therapy, or if you really want to make a sentient machine for some reason. Now, when it comes to the patterns in our own brain, researchers have found unique patterns in brain activity that are consistent across patients with different conditions, like bipolar or schizophrenia. Patients who were diagnosed with a condition or potentially had it were given EEG caps, and their brain activity was measured over time, and yes, they found consistencies between patients. Now, this paper is really interesting for a variety of reasons, one of which is that it gives us some objective measure to diagnose psychiatric conditions and potentially figure out how to treat them. Given that different forms of depression have unique signatures, there may be a point in which you go to see your doctor and they put an EEG cap on you and say, "Hey, you seem kinda depressed." Now, I have complicated feelings about this part because I believe in brain privacy, even from your parents, but you could take a brain scan of a child when it's born and watch them develop. You could figure out if they were likely to get depression, and you could watch it happen based on fingerprinting of their neural activity. In an ideal world, this could be a really great diagnostic tool, especially if you have a genetic risk for a condition like schizophrenia. You can find out whether or not you are at risk from birth. In a less than ideal world, this kind of technology could be used for employment. An employer might want to give you an EEG cap and determine whether or not you are a good fit based on what you are at risk for. So there are a lot of concerns. Every piece of technology has just amazing applications and very well could be used for terrible ones. And of course, there is the everyday concern. Even things like headphones that people can purchase that can measure brain activity, yeah, that could end up being used to sell you stuff. It allows our internal states to be external, but it also allows for programming for computers and physical reservoirs. Now you might ask, why would we want an AI to display mental illness? Isn't that a little counterproductive? Well, there actually are quite a few uses for it. This gives a model for researchers to work with that isn't human. And no, it's not perfect, but it will have a lot less variability than individuals. Yes, there are drawbacks. But when it comes to experimentation, it's usually better not to work with an actual person if you might do harm. It also helps us understand these conditions. Now remember, a physical reservoir is not an LLM, although LLMs have already displayed some interesting mental illness. This study was actually looking at whether or not an LLM could reliably replicate mental illness, and yeah, it did it pretty well. And because LLMs need to be everywhere, this can also be used for the medical field, especially with students learning to work with patients. AIs can also quite frequently display delusions, losing touch with reality, which is why symbolic reasoning is so important and why companies like Anthropic are trying to make AIs that actually understand the world. Some people think that may never happen, but I'm not so convinced we won't get there. I think one of the most interesting interpretations of this research is that if we can model mental illness either in a simulated brain or even in an LLM, that means that it can happen on its own. Things can go awry. That means that we could catch it if it happens, but a lot of the times these systems cannot simply be reprogrammed. We've already seen that happen, and I'm not just talking about physical reservoirs. Even with LLMs, tearing down the entire system because it got a fixation on goblins simply isn't reasonable. As our computers become more and more complex, these are questions we're going to have to ask ourselves. What do we do with a robot if it becomes ill? I don't have a good answer for that, but we do already have machine psychology as a field. If the robots ever do rebel, I will probably be the person to tell you about it, and I'm on their side. Follow for more.